you come from a broken home, especially at an early age, I feel like you start with the disadvantage and you don't really understand it or know it because you can't really articulate what it means to feel abandoned, or to experience trauma.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Remington Ramsey. Today I have, and Justin, I should have found this out ahead of time, but Justin Ford from Detroit. Is there any correlation there that I should know about?
I get that all the time and I wish, but no, there's not.
Well, nationally, maybe within your own city, it's not going to be a big deal, but nationally, this is a huge deal. We have Justin Ford from Detroit on the show.
I love it.
Justin has a phenomenal story, very colorful past and background as a kid, and had a couple life-altering events that we're going to get into, and is just crushing it out there in Detroit with the legends, Chris and Tara Chody. Been featured a couple times. One of the rare people that went from being a rising star to a cover story because of volume. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Remington. Really excited to be here.
This is not your first rodeo. You've been on a lot of shows talking about what you got going. Do you have your own podcast, Justin?
Yep, I do. It's called the Justin Ford Unleashed podcast, and my wife is also a co-host on that show. And yeah, we've been doing that now for about a year and a half.
That's fun, man. That's fun to do with your wife. My wife has been asking to be on the show, and I'm going to have to get her on. I told her to do something interesting, and that was not a good answer.
The cool thing about our podcast is we have a segment within the Justin Ford Unleashed podcast. So she's not on every episode, but 2 episodes a month we do what we call the real, raw, and uncut episodes, where we talk about what it's like to be married for 18 years, have kids, be in the business together, and not sugarcoat it and make it look all great, but really talk about the real struggles and challenges and obstacles, that we go through on a regular basis. And so it's pretty fun.
That's awesome, man. We'll drop that link where we can find that on YouTube and all of our mediums. Tell me about Detroit. So I'm no stranger to Detroit, living in Indy. We make it up there a lot. We were talking about Shinola watches in the pre-show. Yep. What's your favorite part? What part of Detroit do you live in, and what's your favorite part about living there?
Yep, live right on the outskirts of Detroit in a suburb called Plymouth, which is right between Ann Arbor, where the University of Michigan is, and Detroit. And born and raised. So I'm 40. So been here for 40 years. And, the funny thing, Remington, that I always hear, because, we bring a lot of guests here to Detroit, or people that are here for the first time. When they experience Detroit and the surrounding area, they're just kind of like blown away, because nationally, Detroit just has this really bad rap. And everybody just thinks that, Detroit is in the gutter, like you hear, on the news, and then, different people talking about it. But Detroit itself is an actual, like, the downtown area is a beautiful, beautiful city, and it's coming back, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, no doubt. And I was just there this past year visiting some friends in Cass Lake, I think, or Sylvan Lake, that area.
Yep. Great area.
And the amount of mansions on these lakes, like, it's just mansion after mansion. They're massive. It's just like the amount of money up there in those suburbs is crazy to me.
Crazy.
I mean, we have 100 lakes in Indiana, but none of them had the kind of money on that. Like, it was incredible. But you're right. Like, I feel like that is the narrative. For whatever reason, they can't get out of that, crime and dump of a city. But it's just not true. Like, I've been there. It's gorgeous, and I feel very safe. So,
yeah.
Well, let's dig into you, Justin. Tell me about your upbringing and your crazy past and what led you to today.
Yeah. So, I'm 40 years old. I've been in the real estate industry now for 18 years. So my whole adult career, this is what I've known. And so it's been a pretty awesome journey. Started in the mortgage business, and, back in 2008, the market crashed. And so, after my first taste of commission income, I didn't want to leave the industry and go back to work in a regular job. So I decided to start doing loan modifications and short sales. Started learning that aspect of the business. And then back in 2013, when the market started to uptick, I decided to get my real estate license and join the Jeff Glover and Associates team, who is the #1 real estate team here in Michigan. Because I always said, in order to be the best, you got to learn from the best. And so I've been able to create some pretty amazing success over the last 10 years as a real estate agent. But it didn't start out that way. I grew up in a broken home. Parents divorced when I was 2. Dad was an alcoholic. Mom, had me and my younger sister, and things didn't work out. And I always say, my parents did the best that they could with what they had. And I was just sharing with a group of people yesterday, when you come from a broken home, especially at an early age, I feel like you start with the disadvantage and you don't really understand it or know it because you can't really articulate what it means to feel abandoned, or to experience trauma, when you're young. And so, grew up with my mom, till I was about 12. Parents, my mom and my stepdad divorced when I was 12. So my mom went through another divorce. It was my second divorce. And I went to actually go live with my biological dad, who was a recovering alcoholic at the time. Mm-hmm. And, I think those teenage years are pretty difficult, especially when you don't have a really strong home base and you haven't really been taught a lot of stuff. You just go out and you have to figure things out on your own. And so, becoming a teenager, I was living in I'd say a low income area, suburb outside of the Detroit, called Taylor, Michigan, a little rough around the edges. And it didn't take long for me to, start getting exposed to a lot of things other kids were doing. You hear the word peer pressure. And so at a very early age, I was smoking cigarettes, smoking weed, drinking, lost my virginity at 14 years old, which I thought this is what you do. And little did I know that was going to take me down, a path of destruction. I was an honor roll student in high school, had always these goals and these dreams of being successful one day and living a great life. My grandfather was an attorney, and he told me, he said, Justin, you stay out of trouble and you go to college and you get your law degree, come work for me, and eventually you can take over my law firm. And that was my goal. Well, when I was 16, I met this girl. She was 19, fell in love, so I thought, and everything kind of changed. I went, all into this girl, stopped really focusing on school, stopped focusing on football, and started doing more drugs, drinking more, and decided to move out of my dad's house at 17 as an 11th grader, as a junior in high school. And my mom and my dad, both on the phone with me, said, hey, if you move out, you're going to end up dropping out of school. You're going to get this girl pregnant. You're going to go to jail. And I was kind of rebellious at that time. And I just said, you know what? I'll show you and prove you wrong. And really what I did was prove them right. It didn't take long for me to stop going to school and really start, thinking I was a tough guy and, this adult, and got this girl pregnant. The girl that I was with was pretty abusive, physically and emotionally, which caused even more pain. And so I started experiencing with more drugs and, doing more activities like that. And in a very short period of time, I acquired 8 misdemeanors and a felony, all drug and alcohol related, sold drugs to an undercover cop, overdosed, almost died, got beat up by the police, got into a drunk driving accident, almost lost my life, lost my driver's license for 10 years. And, my life had gotten so low during that period of time. There was actually this one time when, I was up 24 hours on a drug binge, and the group of people I was with, it was like 7:30 in the morning, hadn't slept the night before, got kicked out of their vehicle in the middle of a city called Royal Oak here in the Detroit area, got picked up by the police because I was creating, ruckus, and they're like, we got to take this kid in. I was a underage drinker, so they got me with a minor in possession of alcohol. But while I was in that jail cell, this is kind of what really kind of describes how low my life had gotten. Is I was so dehydrated. I thought I was going to die because I was on all these drugs and alcohol, and they wouldn't really give me anything to drink. They had given me just a sacked lunch that had just a little juice in it. If you can remember those little juice cups that had the tin foil on the top. Yeah. And after that, I was asking for water. They wouldn't give me any water. And I was laying on the jail floor, like literally feeling like I was going to die. And I took that cup and I dipped it in the toilet and I began to drink water out of the toilet because I was so dehydrated that I felt like I was going to die. And that's really how low my life had gotten. But it didn't change at that point. The thing that really changed me was I got into this drunk driving accident when I was 19. I crashed my mom's car into the wall. I don't remember it. I blew a .21, which is 3 times the legal limit here in Michigan. And I remember I was completely blacked out. I remember standing next to the state police officer on the side of the freeway. And then the next thing I knew, I was, in the police station, and my mom's yelling and screaming on the phone saying, "You're not coming home. You're done," all these things. And she said, "You need to go to the Grace Centers of Hope. You're not coming back here." And Grace Centers of Hope is a faith-based, like, homeless shelter treatment center. And at the age of 19, I go before the judge 2 days later, just violated probation in 4 cities. It wasn't looking good for me at all. And I just prayed and I cried out to God in that jail cell. And I said, "God, if you'll give me a second chance, I'll change my life." And so I went before the judge, and they actually let me out. No bond, no bail. And I got onto a public city bus that day, and I went and checked myself into the Grace Centers of Hope. And at the age of 19 in that homeless shelter, that's where I found Jesus, became a Christian, and it changed my life. And for the last 21 years, I've been taking my story and sharing it in high schools all across Michigan. I've spoke to thousands of kids about my story, been featured on the news. And now I'm in the real estate industry, and I still share my story, and now twisted into the real estate market, and have been able to really inspire and help a lot of people.
Wow. That's so much to unpack there. But let's start with the kids, because I think that what's interesting about you, Justin, is how soft spoken you are about this. I think back to when I was a kid, which wasn't too long ago, in high school, when DARE officers and speakers would come in, and I went to a private school, and the method was kind of to scare you a little bit more intensely, whereas your story can still scare, but it's done with a soft-spoken love that I don't think a lot of people possess. And it's cool to hear you talk about now on the other side. I mean, losing a life, things that are drastic, like almost losing your life, drinking out of the toilet, but then other things that really probably complicated recovery, like 10 years without a license. Like, that's enough to get you pretty frustrated to go back down a different path, whether it's drugs or just, and you were able to conquer that. What do you think contributed to the desire to just wreck your life in your teen years? Like, what, I don't even know how, I mean, so when you have a dad who's maybe not there a lot, are you able to find ways and drink and do drugs at home? And is that what kind of contributed to, like, the downward spiral?
Yeah. So after my dad started drinking again, after being sober for a couple of years, he was out drinking after work. He was out drinking on the weekends, and there were many times where he would come home drunk, and, he wouldn't know if I was drunk. He wouldn't know if I was high. And I kind of stayed out of his way, but yeah, I mean, if my dad would have stayed sober, he definitely would have known what I was doing, because he would have been more attentive to paying attention to me. But yeah, when he decided to go back to drinking again, I think that gave me kind of a path forward to be able to start doing it as well.
Parents are so important, man. And you know that you've got 4 kids.
Yep.
What if you could have, if you could go and talk to that kid, little Justin, before the 8 misdemeanors, and all the drugs, what would have been the biggest factors that could have kept you from going down that path, you think? Because you were a pretty determined guy. You were good at sports. You were an honor roll student. You were smart kid. It wasn't like it was a lack of education. It was a little bit of pride. But what could have, I mean, you're still a kid at that point. So what could have contributed to you not doing that?
Yeah. And, I've been asked that question before. And also, like, if you could go back, what would you change? And I know it might sound a little bit crazy, Remington, but I'd go back to that young guy and I would say, buckle up. It's going to be hard, but there's a purpose in your pain that you're about to experience. Because if I could go back and tell young Justin to tell him something to change the direction of not going down that path, you and I wouldn't be on this podcast right now.
Yeah.
And that's one of my sayings that I say is, there's purpose in your pain. Like, although it was very difficult to go through those things, I wouldn't change it, because it really made me who I am. And it's given me a testimony to really be able to help people. And I've seen over the last 21 years, thousands and thousands of people that I've been able to inspire and give hope and come alongside of them and really use my story and everything I went through to kind of help them and give them hope. And so it's interesting because I don't know if I would change anything,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that might sound a little crazy, but like I really feel that I had to go through those things to be who I am today, to have the message I am today, that I have today, and to really be where I am today. And not that, young Justin couldn't have taken a different path and still had an impact. I just don't think it would have been as strong of an impact.
Well, you've definitely turned it into something beautiful with the speaking, and now the author of the book Unleashed, 7 Principles of Breaking Free and Breaking Through. Do I have that right?
Yep. 7 key principles to breaking free and breaking through.
And so that's your life story, and what you've gone through and how you've overcome it. And it seems like there's enough there to keep you preoccupied full time, but you're also a top producing real estate agent in one of the biggest cities in America. So your plate's pretty full. What do you guys do for fun when you're not doing one of those two things?
Wow. It's my wife and I get to travel a lot. We're at a place in our life right now where our kids are a little bit older. As I said in my story, I got a girl pregnant when I was 17. I had her when I was 18. So she's now 22, about to be 23. She's married, has a son. So we're grandparents. Definitely didn't, feel like I fit the profile of being a grandpa at this age. Our next son is 19. So our daughter's 22, son's 19, daughter 16, and then our son is 10. And so I'm also a coach with a coaching organization called Glover U. And so we go on the road a lot, speak in cities all over North America. And my wife comes with me because she works directly with me, not only in real estate, but in coaching. And we just love to travel. And what's cool is a lot of our traveling consists of work. And we don't feel like work is work. We feel like it's a part of our purpose. And so we love to do that and really just hang with our kids. They're involved with sports, so we love being able to support them, in their journey of sports. And I don't have a lot of these big hobbies, but I have taken one on recently. I've started playing tennis with my 16-year-old. She's going to be a senior this year, and I absolutely love playing tennis with her. And so,
yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
Is pickleball emerging in Detroit like it is in Indiana?
Oh yeah, it's becoming huge. I haven't played it yet, but I'm going to have to jump on that bandwagon because everybody says how amazing it is.
Yeah, I was never good at tennis. That was the one sport that I could just not figure out. But I've been told that it's like a big ping pong that all ages can play. So I'm gonna have to try that out.
Yep, that's awesome.
Well, let's jump back into your conversion, and it's not an original story to have a life transformed by Jesus, and then you see someone going down a certain path, and then they claim that Jesus is the reason that it changes, and it seems like if that's a cheat code, that everyone would just do that, but many people don't find peace in that option, or maybe they decide not to pursue that. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that this is a tale that's been told before?
Yeah, I think it's, where we are in the world today. If we were talking about this same conversation 100 years ago, it'd be a totally different conversation because 100 years ago, the majority of people followed Christianity. The majority of people went to church. The majority of the people, had a relationship with God. Whereas today it's being removed really out of our culture. And I think when you begin to remove God, you come up with what's the word I'm looking for? You come up with alternatives or, things that are, counterfeits that give people options. And I know a lot of those options have always been there. And so I don't think it's just, giving your life to Jesus. Like if it just stopped with the prayer that I prayed in that homeless shelter and I didn't change, I didn't really pursue it, I probably wouldn't have been the same. Just like, my wife and I celebrating 18 years of marriage this year, if all we said was I do at the altar and we never got to know each other, we never pursued each other, we never grew in our relationship with each other, our marriage probably wouldn't have lasted very long. And so, what I say is this, a lot of times in life when things are going good, maybe you don't go to church, maybe you don't have a relationship with Jesus, but things are going good. Unless you've been exposed to the goodness of God, you may not think that you need God, right? Why do I need God? If everything's kind of good in my life. And sometimes it takes that rock bottom moment. Sometimes it takes that, that moment in life where you realize something's missing. You realize the way you're living isn't obviously getting the job done and it's not working. And you just know, like for me, I was so low in life and I always believed in God. I didn't really know what it meant because I didn't really go to church growing up, but I just knew that there had to be a better alternative than how I was living. And so I was willing to give Jesus a shot, but from a place of sincerity, like through humility. Like it's not something that you can just come to with a place of pride or arrogance and ego. I think one really understands their need for God, when they realize that they really, you see yourself in a different light. And for me, it was a really humbling experience to say, I need help. And when I asked Jesus, to come into my life, he really did. And it completely transformed me.
What's interesting though, is like, if I'm listening to this podcast, I could be at any stage of the game that you were previously in. I could be, 14 and just getting started with, my Mischief. I could be in the middle of it at 16 or 17, or I could be like at the tail end where you, finally said enough. But if we went to the middle of it, I wonder what changed for you to where like that was now the moment of time where you were like, okay, I'm ready. Like I've been humbled enough. I've drank out of the toilet of a prison. Like,
yep.
Can you go back and kind of channel that for a second and see what was the final straw where you're like, it's over. I'm done with this.
It was the pain. I mean, and I remember the first time I got arrested, I begged this girl to come bail me out and she did. And I'm like, I'm never going back there again. Right. Like I'm never going back to jail again. And I did, right. I was arrested multiple more times. I was, and my whole path just started. And so what's interesting is when I look back at that path and that place of mischief and, in that place of struggle, I think I got to a point because it happened so fast. It wasn't like I lived this 20-year, 30-year span where I just had like, things happen here and there. Like all of these things happened over a period of time of like 2 years between 17 and 19. So it was like, I remember in 1 month, I think it was July of 2021, I was arrested 3 times and overdosed in the same month, all within the same month. And I finally just got to a place where I opened my eyes, like I overdosed and I lived. I got into a drunk driving accident, should have been dead, and I lived. And I finally just said, if I don't change, I'm going to die. Yeah. And that was the real thing, is if I don't change, I'm going to die.
So follow-up question to when you made the decision, you went to the homeless shelter, you were led to Christ and you started to change your life. I know, and I think most people listening knows that it doesn't just go sunshine and rainbows from then on out when you make that decision. Were there times in your first couple of years of trying to live on the right path that you were tested or tempted with the easy way out, which is drugs and alcohol, or, just not pursuing? What did that look like?
Yeah. I remember when I got out of the homeless shelter and actually went back to live with my dad in the same environment that God pulled me out of. And I remember that I had the same friends around and I missed them. They were like my friends, even though we got into trouble together. And I remember this one time when I was kind of feeling tempted. I felt like I was missing out. And so we went to this party, and at this party, I took some drugs, drank a little bit, and there was this girl that wanted to have sex with me at this party, and I couldn't do it. I felt so convicted. While I'm high and I'm drunk, I feel like ashamed, like I truly messed up. And I started like messaging my mentors and my pastor, like, I made a mistake. I'm at this party, and I like repented. I was like feeling totally, like I had messed up. And I knew at that moment that I was changed, because my old self, I would have, yeah. And because I 100%, had that experience, and I was just telling this story the other day, like, I feel like I had to have that experience to realize that I really was a changed person. Like that lifestyle no longer had anything to offer me. And after that, I never looked back.
Well, I'd like to transition with the time that we have left to real estate and your role. You talk all the time, just in the short time I've known you, about your marketplace ministry. And I believe that was a pretty cool interaction you had with John Maxwell. So tell me what that means to you, because a lot of people, are turned off by God and Jesus. And you would think that, for some circles that would actually hurt your business to be so outspoken, but this is a big part of your life. So tell me about it.
Yeah, I think people have been hurt by religion. And I would always ask somebody if they want nothing to do with God or church or the term we use as religion when you don't really understand that it's relationship. I would challenge that person to ask why. And you could probably trace that back to one of two things: either some type of hurt that happened due to religion or church, or number two, someone that you were raised by or influenced by who had been hurt by church or religion. Something along those lines happened. And unfortunately, the environment we grow up in can have an impact on us and influence us. And we don't a lot of times draw our own conclusion or pursue our own truth. So we just take on what maybe we had as parents. But for me, when I became a Christian, I got very involved with church very early on. And I really felt called to do ministry. I saw a gift that was in my life. I had a testimony. I had opportunities to share it. And I seen God, touch people through my story. And I'm like, man, I want to do this on a regular basis. And when I was a young Christian, I thought, but I was also drawn to business too. But I thought you had to pick between the two, like business or ministry. And I remember meeting John Maxwell at an Amway conference. That was my first exposure to business, was Amway, back then called Quickstar. And I remember, having an opportunity to talk to John. And I just said, John, I'm struggling. I feel called into business, but I also feel called into ministry. Which one, should I pick? And he said something along the lines of, you don't have to pick, you can do both. And then, he wrote a book called God at Work, or Life at Work, or God at Work, or something. And then I read a book called Anointed for Business by Ed Silvoso, where I was really introduced to understanding marketplace ministry. And then I realized that on this journey of business, because I got into business doing mortgages when I was 22. So for the last 18 years, this industry of real estate mortgages is all I know. And every opportunity I had to share my testimony, like, I saw it impacting people that would normally not go to church, lead people to Jesus, invite them to a prayer meeting or a Bible study, and they'd never been to church, but seeing God use me to influence them, where they just had a different outlook on, oh, wow, we can actually like have a relationship with God without going to church, or we can have a relationship with God and not have to. So it was like, maybe they were turned off by church or God or whatever
aspect of it. Yeah.
But like could come to a Bible study with a guy like me who God would completely change his life, and we could have church together.
Yeah.
And that has been a big impact.
Well, I'm also a Christian, and I think that the toughest part about being a Christian in the last 5 years is that people think that, and I don't know if this is an experience they had with a Christian, that, if you're not a Christian, you're not in the cool club, or you're not accepted, or we hate you, the bigotry. And I just couldn't be farther from the truth by an actual Christ follower. And the one thing that I'll echo is I think that the Bible is not necessarily as much a list of do's and don'ts. It's just a way to not create chaos in your life. If you think about your upbringing and the chaos that you had, following the Bible is not being able to do fun things or sinful things. It's just your priorities change to where you want better things. You want things that are actually fulfilling in your life. So I think you've tapped into that, and your business is thriving, not in spite of it, but because of it. So congrats on all of that. Is there anything that you'd like to leave hope-wise for the listener?
Yeah, a lot of times, because, when you're looking at your life, and I was just sharing to a group of people yesterday, like every single person, Remington, as God created for a purpose. We all have been created for a purpose, and it's our job to discover what that is. Unfortunately, people die every day. And even while we've been on this call, people have passed away around the world who never discovered their purpose. And nobody was born by accident, even though it might have been an accident and your parents didn't plan it. God never had an accident when you were born. And so, I would encourage every single person on this call, no matter where you are along your journey, whether you believe in God or not, whether you're successful in real estate or not, or whether you're not even in real estate, really discover what your purpose is. And what you'll find is it's attached to one of two things: either A, you influencing and helping other people, or B, making the world a better place. And I'm just grateful that I've been able to find that in real estate. I sell on average 100 homes a year. I have a team here of 12 people here in Detroit, 135 I'm a part of EXP. I have 135 agents on my team around the country. I'm a coach. I get to, travel and teach real estate agents all around North America how to be successful. And I don't shy back about who I am. And if that offends anybody, you know what? We're not going to be liked by everybody. But what I've found is by being my true, authentic self and being unashamed of my story and being able to share it in a way that's not pushy, but incorporating it into who I am and what I do, because I never know who's listening and how I can make an impact. It's been pretty incredible. So that's what I would say is be you, discover your purpose, and go out and make a difference in somebody else's life.
And that was Justin Ford on what is a very authentic interview about marketplace ministry. I appreciate you being on.
Thanks, Remington.
All right. Well, if you are not in a market where we have a Real Producers Magazine, I just want to remind you to refer someone or launch it yourself. We've got about 60 markets to go, and we'll be in 200 markets across North America. We've grown like wildfire. Justin is one of many cover stories that we're going to be sharing on this podcast. So like and subscribe and send it to your friends. We'll see you next time.